Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 53. Today's episode is a really long one. I'm speaking with outdoor educator Billie Jo Reid. Billie Jo is extremely easy to talk to. She has an unmatched enthusiasm for the subject of nature journaling and education, and I didn't want to edit down this conversation because everything she said was gold. She is so funny and warm and enthusiastic and insightful. She's making real change with her work, and I can't wait to share all her insights with you now. Let's listen. Billie Jo, thank you so much for being here. I'm really happy to chat with you.
I'm so excited, Bethan. I've been looking forward to this all summer, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
Yay. So let's start. Where should we start? I often start with chatting about early life experiences. Did you have nature in your childhood?
Yeah, great question. So my dad actually was in the military. So I was born in Ottawa, Ontario, but then we moved across Canada. So I lived in Manitoba and actually was really fortunate enough to live on Vancouver Island for 5 years, which
Wow.
was, phenomenal. And so I always just remember us being a family who spent time outdoors, whether or not we were camping or nature walking. It's pretty hard not to do that stuff when you live on Vancouver Island. And I grew up in like the 80s and 90s, and so it was, we had a lot of freedom to just go and do what we want. So I remember never really being at home, but always being in the forest somewhere or doing something. I have this like really profound memory of being in like a pond by myself, like I swear to God, up to like chest height, catching and digging out frog eggs. And I think to myself, I would never let my children do that, right? So, and my parents, they were awesome parents, and they gave me those skills and tools to be able to do that on my own. But it's so amazing. So then when we moved back to Ontario, we lived in the country, and then I started to get into it a little bit through high school. So I took a program in high school which was called the Environmental Leadership Program, and it was a 4 credit semester long program. And we did like a 13-day canoe trip, and we learned how to whitewater paddle, and we
Wow.
worked with the Ministry of Natural Resources, and we did all this like really cool stuff. And I thought, I I need to do this in my life. And so that was a turning point in grade 11. And then I went on to do environmental stuff in school. And then, then my career and everything else after that. So,
Yeah, so outdoor life has been with you from the beginning.
yeah, I don't really remember there being a time when it wasn't something that I was doing for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell me about, so you went from that and you progressed into a career in outdoor education. I'd love
Yeah.
for you to talk about that progression, how you studied, what you studied, and how it came to be that you
Yeah.
were an outdoor educator.
It's a long like it's winding, right? Like
Okay.
it wasn't a straight shot. So I went to Sir Sanford Fleming College here in Ontario, and I took Parks and Forest Recreation and Adventure Tourism Management. And in the beginning, I actually thought that my career would lead me into owning my own adventure company. So where I would be running canoe trips and adventure type trips, things like that. So that's sort of where it went to begin. And then I worked in that industry for a really long time. So I taught canoeing, and I guided solo trips, and I guided with other people. And so with that comes a lot of contract to contract to contract. So you don't just get on and be like, I got a job. It's
Yes.
really got to sort of push through and work on that. And I lived in Ottawa at the time. And so then I would work winters in outdoor retail so I could get the gear really cheap and then I could leave in the summer. And that was always was always my credential anytime I started a new winter job, was like, So, as of May 1st, I won't be here, but I'm planning to come back in September. And they would be like, yeah, it's okay. And so I did that until I was like 27, maybe 28 full time. That was my life, was in and out of the bush, in and out of the bush. And the longest canoe trip I ever did was actually 17 days
Wow.
on the Snake River up in the Yukon, which was like such an amazing experience. And so then I got together with my husband, who we actually went to college together, but then we started dating, 4 years later or whatever. And so he was living in the Orangeville area. So I thought, I think I'm ready for a change. I actually don't think I want to do this owning my own company thing. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a full-time year-round thing. And so I moved here and then I had no idea what I was going to do. So funny enough, I worked in a skateboard shop.
Okay.
And I have never skateboarded in my entire life. And so here I am, 28 years old, and I'm working with like these young high school kids, and I am just like I am out of my element. Anyways, it was a great experience. And then I said, okay, enough is enough. So I quit and I went back to canoe tripping. And then when I was doing that, we got married in 2010, and it's one of those things, things come into your life when they're sort of supposed to. And a job posting came across my computer, and it was to work at the YMCA at one of their outdoor ed centers, and I was like, what? This is the job, right? So I worked there for like 6 months, and then another one came across my desk, and that was for the Peel District School Board. And I started out part time, and which was perfect because I had my girls. And 4 years ago, at the ripe old age of 38, I finally was full time. So it's a labor of love, right? Like to work in the outdoors. It's not always a straight shot right out of school, and it's so funny. I remember them in college on our first day said, I hope all of you realize that this career path will be contract to contract, and you will have to fight, for that path. And sure enough, it took me 20 years, but I've never been happier. I now work at the Peel District School Board in outdoor education, and I get to teach kids K to 12 in all sorts of different things. And I just absolutely like love my job. So it's pretty awesome.
That's an amazing story. I love that roller coaster ride. Contract and then the skateboard store and then
And if you met me, like in real life, you'd be like, "What? You worked at a skate shop?" It's so funny.
and so tell me about your role now with the Peel District and what
Yeah.
what exactly that looks like from day to day.
Yeah, that's great. So right now it's a little bit crazy with COVID, but so I'm gonna speak to it like pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So pre-COVID, basically, we have three nature centers. We have the Jackson Field Center, the Finlandson Field Center, and then we have Britannia Schoolhouse, which is an old historical schoolhouse where we run um, like historical programs at. And so for me, I work at the other two, the Finlandson and the Jack Smythe Center. And so basically, the students come up from the Peel District School Boards, and we run various different programs with them based on the curriculum that is being taught within Ontario. So an example is grade ones might come up and they're doing growth and changes in animals, and so we would run a program around growth and changes in animals, and they're there for X number of hours and then they kind of head home. So that's sort of that. There's, team building and, initiatives and all that kind of stuff. And then COVID hit, and we
Yeah.
were like, what do we do now? Like, because nobody's coming to the field centers. They've actually shut down the field centers for the year because no one could do field trips. And so we had to say, and we have a small staff. There's 8 of us full time on staff. So we are
Wow.
super, super small. And we were like, okay, what are we going to do? So we started off with putting together a website that had a bunch of activities because when it first started, teachers weren't even teaching. So and parents were like, what do we do with our kids? And I was going, what do I do with my kids? And it was all sort of crazy. So we thought, well, if we put together a website that has these really great activities, not lesson plans, but activities where a mom or a dad or a grandma could take them outside to be able to do these really easy activities, but it's based and in the curriculum of what they should be learning. So we started with that. And then in September of last year, they said, okay, so you're going to get a family of schools. And so our board is, I think, the second biggest in Ontario. So it's huge. And we go from, on a map, we would go from Caledon all the way down to Mississauga. So it's a huge space. And they said, you're going to get a family of schools, which is like a chunk of schools. And so my chunk of schools was 38 schools. And they said,
Whoa.
you are the go-to outdoor ed person for those 38 schools. And I went, okay.
Wow.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
And so we started off by just being sort of a resource place, like to help give ideas and sort of walk teachers through like some ideas to get them more outside. Masks breaks were a big thing, things like that. And then I don't remember how it happened, but something happened and we were like, I wonder if we could just join their Google Meet and do like live interaction, like a
Yes.
one-on-one lesson. And we were like, I think we can do that. And so then we started doing that, and that took off. And then we thought, huh, I wonder if we could somehow get internet. Could we do this live from the trail?
Ooh.
And so we did. And so it was awesome. So by the time sort of end of November, first part of December, like it just rocketed off. So for me personally, I was running anywhere from 3 to 4 lessons with classes per day. Some of them like this, where we're in front of a computer, and some of them where I would be live from the forest, like showing them things and all this other stuff, which was pretty wild. And, it's winter. So we were doing that in anywhere between, -20 and -30 degree weather
Wow.
outside with our little selfie sticks and our little mi-fis that were giving us the internet to be able to do that. And yeah, so it was crazy. Like we just couldn't, the amount of people that were looking for that was just, it was astronomical because it was such a crazy year for students and they just needed something different, and teachers needed something different. And we were able, like for me for sure, I was able to create these incredible connections with the teachers because it was almost like I was team teaching with some of these amazing educators. And then the students, we were able to meet with these classes more than once, so that it was like I almost became a part of the class, which when kids come up to the field centers for 3 hours and leave, that connection doesn't get made in the way that they were made last year. So, in all the craziness, I actually had the best time last year. Like, it was just, it was so fulfilling, and we got to try new things, and we got to teach things that we don't normally get to teach. And some teachers were like, this is what I'm teaching. And I was like, all right, give me a day or two. Let me think about this. And then I would come back to them with an idea. They're like, let's do it. I'm like, all right, let's try it out. And then it would work. And then I would be like, let's do it with another class. And it was just such an amazing experience that everyone was so open to be able to try these new things. And yeah, I don't know. It was just really awesome.
I am in awe, Billie Jo. I'm absolutely in awe. And it makes me so happy because this is a story of resilience, creativity, pivoting on the smallest
Yeah.
point, that you have learned videography skills.
Yeah.
You've learned all this stuff about teaching from a distance through Zoom,
Yeah.
and yet you're making it work, and you're making it incredibly fulfilling for yourself, for
Yeah.
the students, for the
Yeah.
teachers, making connections. I'm absolutely
It
in
was
awe.
it was phenomenal. And so I am less worried coming up this year because I know that regardless of whether we're able to start having field trips or we're able to start going, to schools, um, I've made these relationships, and my family of schools this year, for the most part, are the same schools or if the kids have graduated out of the middle school to the other, I have their older school now. So I'm
Yes.
hoping that I'm going to be able to see the same kids. Like I'm actually really excited. I'm such a nerd. I'm so excited.
I'm so interested in this, and I'm interested in, when things really do open up, there'll be things that you've learned and that you won't want to let go of, I imagine,
Yes,
um,
yes. And
in
so
teaching this way.
yeah, I think the thing that we're right now, like we're waiting, right? We're sort of in this weird space of waiting to see what the operating plans are. COVID numbers are going back up here in Canada, so we're just trying to we're waiting at this point to see like when it all happens. So for us, outside of 3 schools that started in August, all of our schools will start in the first part of September. And so we're just waiting on that information. So we don't suspect that kids will be coming to the field centers yet, but what we are hoping is that we'll be able to go to the kids and do programs even at their schoolyards. But yeah, I can't see at this point, and maybe I'm just living in like a really fantasy world, but I can't see virtual leaving because it's such a great way. And we've proved that even if the kids come to the field centers, wouldn't it be awesome if we were able to introduce the program or the concepts or ourselves to them prior to them coming and then
Yes.
follow up with it afterwards? So we're shooting around ideas right now to try and figure out like what that will look like moving forward, because yeah, I don't how do you go back after you've developed all those incredible relationships and you've seen the positive impacts on the teachers and us and the students? I don't know if we can walk back from that. Will it look the same? No, it'll look different. But I'm hoping that whatever we can figure out, it'll still really be centered in, that connection, and connecting us with them instead of us being this sort of like, that's the field centers. Like, we really want to be sort of integrated into that. So that's my hope. That's my utopian hope is that that will happen.
This is amazing, so inspiring. Oh, wow. So now let's talk about nature journaling. So you came to
Yes.
nature journaling about a year ago, and I'd love
Yes.
to know how you found nature journaling and how
Yes.
you got into it.
Yeah. So I dove deep this year, and I it was the best thing that for me, that I could have done. And so I've always journaled. And so when I was 15, I went on a cycling trip with my school. Again, these things don't happen nowadays, but I went on a 1 month cycling tour with
Wow.
my high school to England, Ireland, and Wales, and there was like no parents. There was just like 3 teachers, and it was wild. And we youth hosteled it the entire way, and it was crazy. But on that trip, before we left, the teachers gave us journals, and I was like, "What is this for?" And they were like, "You need to write down what you did." And I thought, "I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't need to do that. I've got a good memory." And honestly, I started writing in it, and I couldn't stop. I still have it to today,
Oh,
and I still can go back and read it and be transported back to that time. And so ever since that, young girl at 15 got her very first journal, anytime I go on a vacation, I take a journal with me. And so I still have all those journals. And when I went on that 13-day canoe trip, I had just recently pulled that journal out, and I was nature journaling in it and didn't know what nature
yeah.
journaling was. And I thought, oh, I was doing it and I didn't know. And there I was, and I was writing in the tree that I seen, and I was writing
Yes.
notes about the birds that I was hearing. And I thought, oh my gosh. And so then I thought, like, isn't it amazing how intuitive nature journaling is at the same time? Like, we just automatically do it and don't really think about it. And
Yes.
so I've been trying to do it for a number of years in like at the centers, but I've never found like I really could get a way of doing it that made sense. It didn't ever make sense. And so it was kind of sensory driven, which is a huge part of it, but it didn't really encompass the things that I was really looking for, those tangible things. And so honestly, I think it was last September on Twitter, I came across how to teach nature journaling. the
Wow.
website. And then I was like, what is this? And then I started to dive deeper and I was like, who is John Muir Laws? And then I dove deep into his website and I watched his 3-piece series on like how to teach nature journaling, what it is. And I was like, I literally, this is what I've been looking for, was a way to frame it and structure it, or as Emily and Jack would say, the scaffolding to make it work. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for in order to really get my head wrapped around it. And so we were watching this and there was a few other staff that were in on it too. And then we said, but what do you do in winter? Cuz like we live in winter. And so I said, okay, listen, I'm going to email this guy. Like he'll never email me back, but I'm going to do a shot in the dark and see if he emails me back. It was like I sent it 20 minutes later, I get a bing back and I was like, "Oh,
Oh, wow.
wow, this
Go,
is
Jack.
crazy." Yeah. And so he was like, I'd love you to join the Nature Journey Educator Forum on Wednesday, and let's make this the thing that we talk about. And I was like, what is that? And so then I found it on the website. That was it. Like once I was a part of that every Wednesday, it took me a while to get into it, but I think by the time December rolled around, I don't think I missed a week. Maybe 1 week here and there, but I was in, because how do you pass up the opportunity to speak with people and educators around the world and just nerd out on all things nature journaling and just get to feel so inspired, and the community that they have created is such a unique and safe space that I started out never saying anything, which is really tough because I'm a talker. And then it was like one day I decided to unmute. And then now I think, poor them. I don't think I can shut up now because I'm just like, I love it so much. Like, it's ridiculous. But it was just awesome. And getting to meet all these people, and then this year with the teacher conference, I was like, I have to be a part of that. So I said to my boss, so I'm like, I'm taking 2 days off. Like I'm gonna 12 hours each day. I'm gonna be nature journaling. So I'm that's just what's gonna happen. And then while I was on that, I was like, I don't think I can pass up the Wild Wonders conference, even if I have to get the backstage pass. And then it wasn't until I had my session with you, I was like, who's she? And what is International Journaling Week? And then I was like, there's a whole other week. And so then I just got super excited. So I'm really looking forward to June because I want to partake in even more. And so then I thought, can I teach this myself? Like, of course you go through that whole thing of like, well, I'm not Jack. I don't know enough about it. I'm not all these other people. And then he's always like, you don't have to be anybody but you. And I was like, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. And then I started. And then it spiraled for me into all these other programs. So I would start by introducing how to teach nature journaling, going through I noticed, I wonder, it reminds me of, and I would have the students have their own phenomenon at home with them, instead of like some people do it with pictures or videos, or you holding up something, but I wanted them to be able to feel and touch the thing that was in their house, and I wanted them to be excited about the thing that was in their own space. And so then I would give them chances to be able to unmute and share what they were noticing, and then other kids were able to jump in and be like, I have an apple too, but my apple looks like this, and blah blah blah. And then I thought, I could probably take this further. And so then I would come back to them, but I would come to them from outside on the trail. And so then I would show them things outside, and they would nature journal what I was showing them live from the forest, which was amazing. And then so now we've all done our own thing, and now we're doing something together where we get to sort of bounce ideas off of each other as to what are some of our wonder questions, this whole thing, which was really amazing. And then I thought, I wonder what else I could do with this. And so then Jack had Beth on one day, and she was talking about haikus. And I thought, oh, well, I'm not a poet, but I think I could do haikus. So then what we would do is I would get the teacher to teach them how to do haikus because she's the teacher or he's the teacher. And then they would come to me in the forest. I
Oh,
would
wow.
show them a phenomenon. And then together we would write haikus about what we were seeing. It was I don't know who had more fun, if they did or I did. And then I would say to the teacher, "You have to scribe everything," and then they would send them to me later so that
Oh,
I had a
wow.
copy because I couldn't write everything down. But I had a macro lens that would go onto my camera, and so I was able to get really close to like the slugs coming out with their big antennas, and they could see all of that on the screen, and then write these really cool poems. And then we do I think around grade 4 we do a program like part of the curriculum is sound. And so a girlfriend of mine at work was using a parabolic mic and walking down the trail, and then she could plug it into her phone, and then the kids could hear all the
Oh,
sounds of
wow.
nature outside. And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. But how do I tie that to nature journaling?" So then I thought, well, we could do sound maps. So I set up a tripod alongside of a lake and said, okay, you're going to journal what's in front of you, like put out your escape, like, sketch it all in. And then I read them a story called There's a Lot of Noise and Silence. And it's Nicole Simpson. They own a forest school just north of here. And so they wrote a book. And so I would read them that, which was all about listening to the sounds in nature while they drew their scape. And then I would plug in the parabolic mic in north, south, east, and west, and then they would write down everything that they heard along it. So it became not only like a nature journaling thing, a sound thing, but like a mindfulness, wellness piece as well, because they're just a lot of the time they're sitting with these incredible sounds of nature. It was awesome. Like, and I just was like, where else can I go with this? And how can I get it to the point where they are writing it down and adding in all this other stuff to it? So, yeah, it was really fun. It was good.
I'm smiling. I can't stop smiling. I love I love the way you've just found this thing and you've just gone, wow, okay, here we
Yeah.
go, here we go.
Yeah, because it
And
was so fun.
yeah, and I'm wondering about like having, well, you were actually doing it without having a label, having had a label for
Yeah.
it. But I'm wondering about that place of being a beginner and being a beginner along with the kids. And I wonder
Yeah.
about that, how you describe that or relate to
Yeah.
that.
That's such an awesome question because I remember on one of the Wednesday afternoons, like sessions, the nature journaling educator forums, I said, it's like I'm having the kids join me on my own nature journaling ride. And
Yeah.
that was like, I was learning right along with the kids. And so, um, Jack always says like give yourself a year to like really, see how it all changes. And so I was doing that with the students, right? Like
Yeah.
learning how I want to frame my questions, listening to the kids and being like, oh, that's a really good idea. And then like adding that in. Or a teacher who was journaling was like, oh, I did it like this. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then taking that in. And, a colleague of mine was like, I started adding emojis to mine to get the kids to
Yeah.
understand their emotions before and then after to see like how nature journaling can be such a calming experience. And I was like, well, that's awesome, Sabrina. I'll steal that because that's such a great way for them. An emoji, that's what they're using
They
to do.
relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can do that. And so I thought, this is awesome. So it was literally me as a beginner learning right along with the kids. The only thing that I knew that they didn't was that scaffolding. That's what I came to the table with, and, just me being me. So, it was just so neat to be able to experience it with them, and I was able to have some really, truly amazing moments with students that will stay with me forever. A young girl, I think she was in grade 6, and when I arrived, you always have kids who are like, ugh, I'm not sure what this guest
Yeah.
speaker is going to be about. And I was like,
Yeah.
And of course, because I'm crazy like that. And I could see already just by the look on her face, I was like, she does not want me here. She is not happy that I'm here. And she is really uncertain about what my expectations for her are. And so she was like, "Well, I don't have a very big piece of paper." And I was like, "That's cool." I'm like, "Do you have more than one?" She was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Awesome. You can use more than one." She was like, "Okay." And she's like, "Well, but this is what I have." And I go, "That's amazing. Like, that's perfect." And so, like, as it went on, she realized that, like, my expectations were
Yeah.
zero, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not marking you. I'm it's not about spelling, like it's not about any of those things that Jack talks about and everybody talks about, right? Like I just wanted her to come along with me on a really fun ride, and I wanted her to explore the plant that she had in front of her. And it was amazing. I watched her change
Yeah.
throughout that hour session to the point where like I couldn't get her to stop talking because she was so excited about what was happening, and it was beautiful. And I just thought like, oh, that's just, the impact of, somebody being 12, like and that they're just going through that preteen stage. And at the end of it, I said, does anyone have any other questions? And she puts her hand up, and I said, yeah, like go ahead. And she said, I just want to tell you that this has been my best day ever at school. And I was
Oh.
like, wow. And I didn't, that was so heartfelt and so meaningful to me. But it was the email I got later from the teacher that really made it hit home. And she said, you don't really understand the implications for that student because she is struggling this year with online, and she is struggling just with everything in general. And I haven't literally seen her smile all year. And I was like,
That's
wow,
amazing.
like, so it was those moments or these really epic conversations that I had with students where I was like, wow, this is going here and we're going. And just them knowing that I was open to it, right? There was no expectation from me, and I was like, if you don't get it done, that's cool. Like you can go back later and finish it. Like there's no rules with nature journaling. And I think letting them know that my expectation was just that, I feel like I got even more buy-in from them, that it made it even more enjoyable. So that's kind of how I run it. And it worked, and it worked really well. And yeah, so I just got to go along with them, and it was the best experience. There was days where I would do like 4 hours of nature journaling with classes. I was like,
That's
I would
amazing.
literally like end one and be like, "Hello, let's start again."
Wow, that's epic.
Yeah. It was just so great. Honestly, I feel all flooded by it just remembering it because it was just such a wonderful experience.
One thing that I really appreciate about nature journaling is its flexibility. So,
Yes.
wherever you meet the child, wherever they are in that moment, and you can adapt it. If you have someone who's resistant, if you have someone who's incredibly curious, you can go there. It meets you where you are,
And I
and
loved that about it because every class there is multiple levels within a class. The kids are coming from different backgrounds. There's different stresses going on in their lives. There's different learning abilities in their lives, you know, and I think I love that. And that was one thing that I really took away from your session that you did about nature journaling for all ages was I was like, yes, because I thought to myself, I'd been doing it with kindergarten online, which is tricky, right?
that is tricky.
But what I did was I let go of their need to have things written down. It didn't matter as long as we were going through the process together,
Yes.
then it didn't really matter. And so we went from try your best to write your words down to like, you can put googly eyes on your page and point to the things that you notice. And they were like, okay. And then, it went to like, if you have someone at your house who's sitting beside you, ask them to help you out. If you can write down the first sound of the word, right? And then it went to like the questions being like, if we write them down, great, and if we don't, we've said them out loud. And
Yes.
then a teacher actually said to me one time, like with kindergarten, was instead of them getting them to write what it reminds them of, they could draw a picture of themselves and a thought bubble. And I was
Oh,
like,
I like that.
yeah, because they're just drawing another picture, which is what they love to do. And then you had mentioned like doing prints and things like that. And I thought, oh, so that's where I'm going this year, is like, that's where I want to be. Like, what else can I bring to that kindergarten table? But we have English language students here. It's a big population of students who their second language is English. And I did nature journaling with them at a high school level, and it was fantastic. It was like the best thing that we could do, because you're using simple words, simple sentences. It's a new language. It was, phenomenal. So again, it's every level, every, like, you can't really go wrong with it, is where I'm sort of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing is, you can tailor it to different subject areas. So you can focus on maths, you can focus on science, you can focus on inner work like mindfulness and all that stuff. There's so many different things you can do. You can do language, you can do whatever your focus area is at school.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing with the website now. So I wrote an introduction that used like your website, which I cannot thank you enough for letting us like link to that, but really putting it at the top, because I thought it was so important that I was like, I don't want it just to get mixed in. I want nature journaling. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, to be at the top of each of the curriculum pieces for all the grades. And so for right now, our website only goes K to 8, because 9 to 12 is a little bit more tricky, because there's so many different courses. We haven't figured out
Yeah.
how to do that specifically yet. But I wanted to give that introduction and that base, but the opening paragraph links it to that curriculum. And it's in like data management, it's in like algebra, it's in patterning, it's in oral language, and right now we're even working on how we can link it into our history as well,
Yes.
because in my world, they can be looking at the roles and responsibilities, say for grade 1, they can be looking at roles and responsibilities of the animals and the plants that are outside. They can be, if they're looking at first contact with indigenous people, well, go outside and journal what you see around you and figure out what treaty lands you're on, who's supposed to be here. And then wouldn't it be awesome, if a teacher could then, have a guest speaker from, you know, the Mississauga, the credits, come in and do a talk about that, but the kids have actually spent time in nature on that treaty land. Like, to me, it's such an amazing way to connect it. And so we're really focusing it in as a tool, because I don't want people to think that it's like, check, we've nature journaled
Yes.
once, because
Yes.
that's not what it is, right? Like, it's really something that you have to dive into. And I say to teachers, like, you need an assessment piece? Like, hello, it's a whole book, right? Like, it's all there, and how you choose to assess it can be based on what the specifics are, right? So if you're saying, we're journaling about growth and changes in animals today, then that's what you're assessing. Again, you're not assessing it's a pretty picture or whatever. You're looking at specifically what the curriculum is asking. If you're doing poetry, well, now you can add millions of different poetry right into your nature journal. If you're doing data management, why aren't you counting the squirrels outside? Why are we counting beans inside, right? And so that's where I think, like, the more time we can have them outside and connecting to that and keep riding this. I feel like there's like with COVID, there was a huge spike in people getting outside and reconnecting with nature. And we seen it in the parks and stuff like that. And I'm sure you probably did in Australia as well. Like, just unbelievable amounts of people just flocking to the outdoors. And so in my world, I'm like, let's keep it. Like, if people are
Yeah.
listening and they're getting it, like, we need to keep that momentum going, because that's where we need our kids to be back at, right? Is back in that space that makes them feel calm and makes them feel good, and connects them to something greater than just the television, right?
You're 100% right. Yeah, I love that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about teaching nature journaling when you're a beginner, because I know that that is something that Marley Pfeiffer talked about at the Nature Journaling Teachers
Yes.
Conference. I'm not sure if you went to his session, but
I didn't, because I went to yours. But I follow Marley on Instagram, and I've watched a number of his YouTube channels. He's amazing, and I listened to his podcast with you, and I had so many aha moments listening to his interview with you, your interview with him, and I was like, yes, yes, so much good stuff. So he's amazing too.
Yeah, he's a deep thinker. And this
Yeah.
concept of like being able to throw yourself into teaching from the beginning, I love it. I think it's amazing. I think that's exactly what you're doing. And I'm wondering if you have any insights for others who might be beginners
Yeah.
who also want to bring this into their classroom or to their homeschool setting or just to their children or whatever.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me was I needed to be not only teaching it, I needed to be doing it on my own time.
Yeah,
And I
okay.
needed to have my own experiences without a class. To be able to really take the time with myself and my own thoughts and my own sort of experiences about how I wanted the page to look or what that sort of looked like. And that has changed dramatically over time in the last year for sure. And I started out just with it'd be like a picture, and maybe there was some arrows coming off of it, but mostly I was writing in the corners, and it was just pencil crayon. I didn't do anything with watercolor. That was crazy town. And now I do watercolor most of it, and there's all these different things that I've added. But for me, I always tried it out on my own first. And just with myself and going and taking the time to do that, and then being unapologetic that you're new. And I think, take the expectations off yourself as well, right? Know the scaffolding, have the general concept, but really let it go. Like, and that's hard for a lot of people, right? Like, it's really hard to be like, because you have all those tiny voices in the back of your head that are screaming, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. But you really have to be like, but I am worthy because otherwise I wouldn't be in this job, right? They wouldn't have hired me if I couldn't teach children. So I can teach children. This is just something new and we're going to experience together. And I never have a problem telling children, I don't know. I don't know the
Yes.
answer to that. I don't know. I don't know. And just being unapologetically honest about the facts that, I don't know the answers to everything because, they think because I'm an outdoor ed and I do know stuff that they say, oh, you're like an expert. And I'm like, there's always somebody who's going to know something more than I do, right? Like, I am not an expert. I am a lifelong learner. And, do I know stuff? Yeah, sure, I know stuff, right? But I'm not an expert. And I think that that's the biggest thing is really letting go of those inhibitions, being unapologetically honest and journaling on your own, taking that time for yourself. And I know you've mentioned it before because you have a young son as well. It's hard, and I have two girls, and they're one's gonna be 10, and is according to her 15 days, because she's counting down, and the other one is 7. And so even at that age, it's hard for me to sometimes go out and
Mm.
just sit and journal. So sometimes it's easy for me to be like, that's cool, take pictures of it, my own pictures that I've taken, so I've experienced it, multiple angles, whatever, and then later be able to then journal based on my pictures. Now, does some of the stuff I miss out on? Sure. Sometimes I miss out on a little bit of the math and things like that, but sometimes I can like say those out loud and I kind of remember those. But the process of going through all of it, I can still get because I took the photos, right? I experienced that myself. And one day when they're older and I don't have to be, 100% mom, I'm going to be able to have a lot more liberties to sit in the garden for a longer period of time uninterrupted. That's just not my life right now. And that's okay, right? Like, that's okay. And so I think that's my thing is just being okay with what you're doing and knowing that nature journaling, there's no rules. You cannot not do it right. You cannot not do it wrong, right? It's just the way that you do it is the way that you do it, and that is okay, right? I listened to your podcast, the woman, and you have to forgive me, I can't remember her name, where she was doing the nature journaling with the makeup. Like,
Yeah,
that's amazing,
Sabrina.
right? Yeah, Sabrina, yeah. And I was like, that's not something that we think about. Oh, nature journaling, on the eyes, but it is, and it's incredible, and it's stunningly beautiful. So I always say to the kids, there's no rules. I always say there's a teeny tiny rule, but that is just your metadata. Let's just put your metadata in because we are still scientists. I said outside of that, you get to be as creative as you want to be. It's your brain on the paper. So I said, it's all of them are going to look different and we have to celebrate those differences. So me being a beginner, it's going to look different than what you would do or Marley would do or Melinda or Jack, like all these other people would do because they've been doing it longer, and they're also a different person. They're not me and I'm not them. So you can only come with you, your scaffolding, and a pencil and a paper.
That's the best, Billie Jo. That's so,
Yeah.
so fantastic. I love that John Muir Laws has given us these two triads. The two
Yeah.
triads are so helpful. We use words, pictures, and numbers, and we can respond to the prompts. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And that is just a world in itself, right? You could just do that forever.
Literally mind blowing for me, those two triads. That is what I was looking for. And so the other nice thing I like about those triads, especially the words, pictures, and numbers, is I'll say to the kids, if you're looking at this and saying like, "Whoa, yikes, she wants me to draw a picture," and I'm like, "Well, that's
Yeah.
cool. Like, you're not that great at it. Like, neither am I. I'm not an artist, So you're gonna draw it like a diagram. That's cool. And if you really love words, you're gonna add more words. And if you're someone who loves numbers and loves math, well, you're going to add more math. And there's no rule that says you have to have 35% of this and 50, there's no rules. And that is where I think kids go, oh,
Yes.
oh, there's no expectation. I'm not going to fail the test, because I'll get kids all the time saying, well, did I do it right? I go,
Yeah.
does it feel right? Like, you can't do it wrong. Even about their questions, I go, it doesn't matter if someone else in the group knows the answer. I go, because the answer is not what we're looking for. We're learning to be curious today, and it doesn't matter if someone else knows the answer because you don't know. So that's your question. I said it doesn't matter. And I said today we're going to just think about cool ideas and things like that. And that, for some kids is a really big challenge to think abstractly, right? Which is really fun to walk them down that path of just, being the question person. Because you'll get them sometimes where they're like, I don't know the answer. I'm like, yeah, you don't need to know the answer because I don't know the answer either. They're like, you don't? I go, no, I don't know the answer. I don't need to know the answer. And they're like, wait, what? The expert doesn't know? No, I have no idea what the answer is. And they're just like, wow. And then all of a sudden it's like, it starts to pour out of them because you've taken away the obstacle. And that obstacle is that you must know the right answers. You must get the right answer on the test. You must score well. And we're not looking for that. And I just think it's such a freeing feeling to be like, I don't know, but what a great question. That's pretty awesome. And there's like, wow. And when they ask really deep questions, you're like, yeah. Like, we've had spiritual questions, like
Yeah.
where it kind of goes down a religious path. And I've got kids in my class from all different religions. What an incredible space to provide children to talk about their faith and their culture as it wraps and pertains to nature. Like, how beautiful is that? Like, it's just
That's,
beautiful.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
I love so much about what you just said, and I'm not sure where to go because I wanted to say something that you just said, which was, we're learning to be curious today. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, with the school system as it is, in most cases, we are putting kids in a box and saying, this is the right answer. Like you said, this is the answer to the test. And did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? Here, we're not saying that. We're saying we're learning to be curious today. What a gift. What an amazing thing.
Isn't that amazing? And, something I had an aha moment with Jack this year is that I was as an educator, I would ask a question, and then it was like I was searching for the right answer, for some kid to give me the right answer. And I was like, oh, I'm totally doing that. And when he brought that up in one of those Wednesday chats, I thought, I need to be better than that. I need to be better than that. And it doesn't matter. And so I actually stopped doing that. I would ask a question and then I would just take all the answers. I'd be like, I love the way you're thinking about that, and never actually give them the answer. Because
Yes.
the more I learned about it, the more I was like, it doesn't matter what the right answer is. If they need to know that, they can go find that. And that's what I say to them, I'm actually not you I want you to ask as many questions as you want in this. I'm not looking for, because someone will be like, I'm only writing one because I'm going to have to find the answer to this.
Oh,
And I'll
yeah,
say,
yeah.
before they even start, I'll say, you're not expected to answer any of these questions. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, you're not expected to do any of that. And I said, I just want you to ask a bunch of questions. I said, now if you come across a question that is burning, like you need to know the answer, I go, you can research it or ask me. And if I
Yeah.
know the answer, I'll tell you. But that's not what this lesson is about. And I took that away from the discussions over the course of this year, is just letting students have that curiosity, but just that fundamental freedom in their own education to just like let it go. Just like, you asked me earlier about being new to nature journaling and teaching. It's the same thing. It's learning to sort of let some of that go, that you can just be unapologetically you. And as those sessions went along with those kids, the quiet kids would all of a sudden start talking more. The quiet kid wrote the incredible haiku and then had the guts to share it with us. And that's what you want. A right answer is great, but if you can have that kid who's quiet but has so much to say, have the courage to say it out loud, and for everybody in the class to respond with a resounding like, "Yes, that was awesome." The light on that child's face is worth all the right answers in the world. Is that you've given them that creative outlet, I just think is so awesome, right? And for me as well, right? Like I never wrote poetry.
Yeah.
And to be able to, have those same moments with the kids and kind of build it up. I worked with a group of students who would be, we call, I think they were in like a comms class. So um uh, you know different learning disabilities within the class, and so it's a smaller class, and sometimes they're a little bit shyer, and things like that. And they were the first class that I did haikus with. That's the class that I tested out haikus on. And I said after that, those kids just had such an amazing time and were
Yeah.
so outward with their thoughts. And when you write haikus, you really tap into like the emotions, right?
Yes.
And I thought, oh my gosh, imagine what a class of 30 would look like if this class of 8 just rocked this. And I spent so much time with this class, and every time they would come out of their shell a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Or other classes would be like, Billie Jo, I'm so happy you're back, and I have to tell you about the sit spot that I
Oh,
have, and you have to come to Mississauga and you have to check out my sit spot. And I was like, this this is life goals. Like this is where,
absolutely.
yeah, like kids are wanting to share with me what they've experienced in their own community through this experience that I've been sharing with them, and where I've been taking them, which is close to my home. I just The connection there, I just think is so grand. Like it's just so grand. I don't even know the word to use. It's bigger than grand. Like it was just so great, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So much about that is amazing. One of the things you said, that the quiet kid can be the one to share something really profound. And I've also experienced that, like someone who has a lot of energy, someone who's having trouble focusing, doesn't really want to be involved, can often be the one who sinks deeply into that moment
Yeah.
and is sitting quietly and focused and soaking up nature in a
Yeah.
very
Real
physical.
way,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I work with over the last 5 years, I've worked with kids in our board who have like ADHD. So they're
Yeah.
really high energy, and I've been working with them for a long time. So I've known these are the kids I get to see more than once, and so I've got a pretty good relationship with them. And this one kid who I just adore more than life itself. Um, and I've known him for probably about 3 years, and we were gonna do nature journaling, and it's virtual because everything's in lockdown. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna try it. We're gonna see how it goes. And he said, I don't have any nature. And I said, oh, honey, I said, just go to the refrigerator. I said, grab like an apple or
Yes.
something. He's like, I don't have anything. And I was like, I really want you to go and see if you've got something. And he's like, I have a juice box. And I was like, all right, like we'll go with it, right? And then he says to me a few minutes later, well, I have grapes. And I was like, yeah, go get your
Yes.
grapes, right? Well, next thing you know, he's peeling the grape.
Yeah.
He's like, "Can I cut this open?" I'm like, "Yes, you can." And he was just, and I never said no, right? There was never a part where I said, "No, you can't do that." He cut it open, and then he'd be like, "There's seeds inside." And I was like, "Yeah, buddy." I'm like, "How many seeds are in there?" Well, like I see like four seeds and they're in this pattern and blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, that's right. And this is a kid who not only has ADHD but definitely has like learning disability as well. And then he was like, "Can I cut the seed open?" I'm like, "Yep, you bet." And again, the same thing, to watch this kid dive,
Yeah.
that will be a moment that sticks with me the same, right? And having this kid who I've known for a long time, who I adore, literally the sweetest kid in the entire universe, but definitely struggles in a normal class, a quote unquote normal class. To watch him dive deep into this grape for over an hour was
That's amazing.
spectacular. Yeah. So, and I think that comes back to what you said before, right? That you meet them where they're at. And if you can find something that sparks something in them that gives them that confidence to roll with it, then I think that we've done our job as teachers and educators, right? Like, I think
Yeah,
that's all we can do.
absolutely. That's an amazing story. I love that. I'm wondering, because you span like all the grades, and when children are very, very young, they have such a freedom with art. They're just splashing paint. They don't care. They don't judge it. And then there's a point when they start to judge it. And I'm wondering, in my experience, it's around 8 or 9. I'm
Yeah.
really wondering about your experience, what age that is, and how you ease kids through that.
Yeah, I think that comes back to that being unapologetically honest, in that
Yeah.
I'm not an artist either. And so when I first started teaching it, and I guess you kind of coming back to one of your other questions about like what kind of insight I can give into that, is that
Mm.
when I first started, I was just kind of like holding up the scaffolding and being like, write it down, I notice, and so, and I was kind of waiting for them to do it. And then as it progressed, I thought, I think that I should journal with them, like
Yes.
along with them. And I think that this will be a better experience for them. And so then I got like this crazy document camera and gooseneck thing. And I would sign in with two different devices, and I would say, okay, well, I'm going to journal along. And so we would do our metadata together. We would do a title, and I would say, this is what my title would be. What's yours? Blah, blah, blah. And so then they would see the drawing that I was doing, which is a pretty simple sketch. I'm with them for an hour and there's not a lot of time for like massive detail. Not the detail that I would probably if I was sitting by myself and I had a longer period of time. So I thinking just really like, well, this is the general shape. There's five
Yep.
petals, blah, blah.
Yep.
And I think them just seeing that I was just being like, oh, okay. And I would say to them, it's not about a pretty picture, and I think that that's a really important piece. And I said, like, there's no judgment on that. And I said, you're really looking at the shapes, like which shapes do you see, how can you sort of get there? And I always say, your picture is here to so that your brain can remember what it looks like, and your words and your numbers are there to help describe the picture of what you've seen. So I said those three things work together. So it's not about the world's best picture, but I said if you see that there's a brown mark on it, I said you got to put the brown mark on it so you remember what the brown mark was. And I said then you're going to use your words to like add on to that. And I said you're going to add fancy arrows to it and all that kind of stuff. And I said later when we're done, I said you go back and add the color to it and whatever. So I just try not to make it a big deal, but try to really say to them like take some of the stress of that off. And
Yes.
again, coming back to that, if you're better with words, then draw a really simple diagram and really use your words to describe what it is that you're seeing and feeling, and then get in the numbers. So I'll say to them like, on the diagram, like draw the line that says this is the length, and and so it becomes less about the picture, I think. So I try to,
Yes.
because the picture is important. It is very important, and it is a lot of fun to do the picture, especially the more you get into it on your own. Like I love doing the picture, but I have to honestly tell you that one of my favorite parts of nature journaling is the I wonder. I
Mm.
love nerding out on all of the questions. And so then I'll say to them, all right, we're to the best part, and that's the I wonders. And so I've really just sort of like taken away, I guess, kind of like, I guess I'm thinking about it, but I'm, in a calculated way, but also, just kind of not making it a big deal is probably
Yeah.
my best thing. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. The advice to do it along with the students, I think, is
Yeah.
super valuable. Not
Yeah.
only are they seeing your enthusiasm and your example of how to do it, but also just that you're not fussing with detail, that you're not um, an art, a professional artist who's going
Yeah.
to demonstrate here.
And the other
It's
thing too is I'm the worst speller. So I'll say to them like,
yeah,
"Yeah, spelling doesn't matter today." And I was like, "I can guarantee that I'm going to spell something wrong today."
yeah,
And
that's
just
awesome.
also being okay with that myself, that sometimes stresses me out, especially if I was at the field centers and to write something on the board, I'd be like, "Oh, did I spell that right?"
Yes.
And then just be like, "Who cares? Who cares if I spelt it wrong? Like, what's the big deal if I missed an E somewhere, right?" And I'll say to them, and like I do it in pen. So I said, if I mess up, like it's there for life. So I said, then I got to come up with some kind of fun way to like, make it different. I said, sometimes I add little hearts around it to show love to my mistake, or
Oh,
whatever. Um, but I said, sometimes I said, some people will be really strategic and really organized in their thoughts. And I said, as you can see, I'm a little scatterbrained, I'm a little bit all over the place. And I go, that's okay too. And so I think just letting them see me for me is okay, right? And just doing that and saying it's not bad to be organized, but it's not bad to be a little bit all over the place too, because it's your thoughts, it's your brain, it's your emotions, it's your everything, and no one can really tell you that you're wrong when it comes to your own thoughts and feelings. You just can't be wrong with that. So, especially when it comes to nature journaling. So that's how I kind of, you know, come to it with them, to try and ease some of that stress, which I know they'll have. I see it, to be honest, I see it the most in high school kids. Is
yes.
really when I see it in high school kids. And I just have to say to them, like, you got to let it go. Like, you got to let it go. It's not really about that. And so just taking the emphasis off. In fact, I don't usually even talk about the picture that much at all. I talk about what I see, so that when I'm drawing it, it's like, oh, I noticed that this is so okay. I'm gonna get that in there. So it's not really like, okay, I need to make sure that they're exactly symmetrical, blah
Yes.
blah. Like I don't have time for that. Like in a 1 hour session, I might have time for that on my own. But and I say to them, I think one thing Jack always says is that drawing is a skill. So I say to them, like, the more you do it, the better you get. So I said it's no different than writing or doing your math or riding a bike. I said, so just take that off your plate. Like, if this is the first time you've ever drawn, like, you can't expect to be, I always say Robert Bateman because he's a very famous Canadian artist, but none of the kids know who he is, anyways. But he's a very I should say, he just passed this summer, but he was
Okay.
one of the world Canadians, doing nature
Mm,
paintings, just absolutely stunning pictures. But I knew him growing up.
yeah. I yeah, you've said so many wonderful things. I'm interested that you said you love the questions.
Yeah.
You and I was that was actually something I was going to ask you about, whether or not there was one of those three prompts that draws you the most, and
Yeah.
you answered that.
Yeah, the questions, I just think like that's I have never been a person who shied away from asking questions
Hmm.
for anything. And so, sometimes that may get me into trouble. Sometimes, it's not always welcome, but I ask them anyways because I figure if you don't ask the question, then how are you supposed to know and how are you supposed to learn and how are you supposed to grow? So I've always been somebody who asks lots of questions, and I always follow them up with even more questions to really get my head wrapped around stuff. So I think that's the part that I really like, and just being able to see the connection between them as well. Fiona is a great example of the way that she connects all of her questions together. And so I started to say to kids, like when they do the could it be sort of focused questions, I, sometimes like put them in a thought bubble and then, put off your could it be's from that and then look back at your could it be's and then think like, well, if you're wondering why the leaf is green, so let's just say they like, why are leaves green? And then you say, well, is it because of water? Is it because of sunlight? Is it because of chemicals? Is it because of this? Blah blah blah. And then they go to the chemicals and they go, well, are there chemicals in plants? Like that. Now you just ask another question off of that, right? And then like, well, if there are chemicals, are they toxic chemicals? Like, are they like, where do these chemicals come from? Or if it's the sunlight, how does the sunlight trigger that? Are they, and so you've taken one question and you've spiraled that into this entire maze of inquiry. And I always say to the teachers, like, pay attention because this is where you're going to go with your next lesson. You're going to pick some of these inquiry questions and you're going
Yeah.
to run with it. The kids have given you the lesson. This is what they're interested in doing. This is where you're going to go with that. And it's like, it's beautiful because now it's really student driven if you're able to take their questions and do that, or take their questions and give them the opportunity to test it out, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with them being able to come up with some kind of test to to do that or to spend time with their observations and learn more about it. So I just think the question part really allows them a huge freedom, but I feel like you have to do the words, pictures, and numbers. I notice to open those floodgates to get to there. And then by the time you get to it reminds me of, you know, I remember I watched a video with you and you were like so unapologetically awesome. You're like, I have no idea what this means. And I remember thinking, me too. Oh my gosh, Beth, I'm so happy you said that because I thought I didn't really get it either. Like it seems easy enough when you say it. It's making
So for the
connections.
listeners,
Yeah.
for
Oh yeah,
clarification,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about so I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and for International Nature Journaling Week,
Yeah.
I I was in with John Muirlaws, who was doing a session on it reminds me of, and I said to the to the people who were present, I want Jack to do this because I don't really understand this prompt. I teach about it and I'd like to know more.
And I thought it was so awesome. I literally laughed out loud. I was like, yes! I don't know if any of us really know what it is. And it was so awesome. And I thought, yeah, we all say what Jack says, which is you're making a connection to the things you already know. And you're like, I get it. But what does it really mean? Right? And so I always used to think, like, ugh, I don't really know either. But then I found the more I did it with kids, the more I felt that they automatically did it without even me thinking about it or really having to prompt them too much into it. And then, my daughter Aspen, she's my youngest. I was doing, I think, oh, it was the Nature Journaling Educator or the Educator conference. and she came in and said, "Can I join you?" And I was like, "Yep, for sure." And so I was doing a lily, and so it was one of our breakout moments where you had to do stuff. And so I was actually dissecting it. I was pulling it apart, and I had my hand lens, and she was like, "Ooh, what's this?" And I was like, "Take a look." And so I had cut it open to see the eggs, like before they become seeds. And she immediately, I just sat there. I started writing stuff down in my nature journal and said, like, Aspen said. She was like, they look like this. They look like eyeballs.
Yeah.
They look like this. This is what it reminds me of. This is what I'm wondering. And I was like, wow.
It flows out naturally, right?
I didn't prompt her on anything. She picked up a hand lens, she picked up the flower, and then all of this incredible stuff started flowing out of my little 7-year-old. And it was amazing. And so now in my nature journal forever, I will have this one day where Aspen walked into my room and, started flowing this stuff out on, and I just scribed everything down that she was saying. And I thought to myself, so coming back to it reminds me of prompt. Well, some kids will say during their I notices, well, it reminds me of sunshine. And I'll be like, beautiful. And so I
Yeah.
come back to that at the end and be like, so remember when you said that it reminded you of sunshine? Why does it remind you of sunshine? Right. And so looking back, and so just trying to be mindful for myself and really authentically listening to what they have to say so that I can bring them back to that when it comes that time. Because when someone says, what does it remind you of? Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know. But if you listen to them as they go through the process, often enough they will make those connections on their own, and it's just your job to bring it back to their attention, which I think is really fun. And then the other part is telling them that it can remind them of a feeling, a thought, a time in their life,
Yeah.
something like that, and to really make it deeper than just another object or another thing. And so that's really fun too when a kid says, this reminds me of one time I went camping, and then I'm like, where did you go camping? And then all of a
Yes.
sudden you're able to change that conversation to bring in that personal piece to it. It's a gift to be able to do that and let those kids, because kids just want to share, right? They just want to talk, they want to be heard, and it's just such a beautiful way to let them express themselves. And I think one of the major jobs as an educator and a facilitator is to give them that space, give them that breath to be able to do that. Because I think if you rush through it and you're just the talker, that's not nature journaling. I just don't think that's it's not a lecture. They have to do, they have to listen to your scaffolding. They listen to me sort of give them some examples. Then I say, go do. Well, I do. And then I say, okay, it's time to share. And then we share. And then, through the chat or other things, kids will jump in and start adding things onto what each other is saying. That to me is nature journaling, is that community and that connection between what you're doing. And I really feel that really takes a lot of the pressure of the expectation of the pretty picture away, because you're sharing your own thoughts and feelings, and something happens in that it becomes a really safe space. I've never come across, knock on wood, I've never come across a situation where a kid wasn't supportive
Mm.
of another kid's thoughts, feelings, and what they noticed or what they were wondering. It was accepted, celebrated, and if anything, uplifted by what they had to add to it. And I think that is magic. I don't know any other place that I've experienced that situation before.
After Jack's session at International Nature Journaling Week, I was all about it reminds me of. I was like, yes, I get it, I get it, I get it. And I realized the value of it, and I realized that I had been doing what I had been doing in my lessons, my workshops was fine and valuable.
Yeah.
I think I was looking for or expecting that I was supposed to be getting something else out of it. But now I realize that some of the richest experiences and sharing that I had had in workshops with participants was the emotional stuff, the very personal stuff, the memories that came from that prompt.
Yeah.
That can be really magical.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when when a student or anyone lets you glimpse into that,
Yeah. Mm.
is I just feel really honored that I was able to be a part of that and was honored to be gifted that moment because it is personal, right? And a lot of people, it's hard to share personal things, even if it's a happy moment, because you're
Yeah.
always afraid to be judged, right?
Yeah.
Or, oh, you go camping, or oh, you do this. And people were just like, that's awesome. Or
Yeah.
like, where did you go? Or the best is when you find someone else in the group who has also done the same thing. And
Yes.
then you have this other connection where, you've celebrated this, this situation together. And yeah, it's been really cool, like, to think back on all of the different conversations and where they've gone, and just some of the things that kids come up with. I was like, wow, that's deep. That's deeper than this 41-year-old brain goes sometimes,
Yeah.
and you're 13, right? And so
Yeah.
insightful, and it's just really, really magical to be able to be a part of that. And really, especially in the last year, to really give them a chance to share, but also uh, to share sometimes their feelings, and I try to be honest when I do the emoji thing. I'll say to them, because kids are always wanting to write down what you think they want, what
Yes.
they think you want them to say, right? And so I'll say to them, like, somewhere on the top of your page, I want you to think about how you're feeling right now, and I want you to use an emoji to, you know, um, express what that looks like. And I said, I want you to be honest. Like, if you're feeling happy, awesome. But I was like, if you're feeling sad, I want you to put down a sad emoji. I said, if you're feeling frustrated, put that down. I said, if you're like apprehensive because this crazy woman named Billie Jo just came into your classroom and you have no idea what the expectation is, and so you're feeling really anxious about that, write that down. And I'll put myself out there as that person who could be giving them that anxiety, because that's real. They don't know me, and they don't know what my expectation of them is. They don't know what kind of person I am. And so if I can put that out right away and joke about it, like, perfect. And then we come back to it, and I'll say to them, I want you to be honest. Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel the same? Write it down, right? I said, maybe you hated nature journaling. Maybe you hated this entire process. You're going to write it down, and giving them permission to be like, I didn't like
Yes.
this, because not everybody's going to like it. And that is okay. But you came with me for the ride. You put in the work for the hour, and that I appreciate, right? And so the kids, and I'll say to them, all right, who wants to share how their emojis have changed? Some kids are like, I feel the same. I'm like, awesome. Some people are like, I didn't like it. I'm like, great, perfect. That's great. Thank you for being honest. And some kids are like, I was feeling really sad at the beginning, and I feel really happy right now, or I feel really curious right now, or I feel really excited, or I love nature journaling. And on a whole, if you were to do the percentages, 90% are feeling on a trajectory of up and better. You're not, you can't please everyone. You're not going to change everyone's world in an hour. But if you can get 90% of the kids moving that way, and a couple of the rest of the 10% to think about it, I think that's a pretty big
Yes.
win, right?
And the thinking about it is so powerful in itself. I was just thinking, yes, this is amazing because you're using an emoji, which is like their way of
Yeah, they
expressing
communicate
emotions.
everything with emojis. Yeah, I communicate lots with emojis.
Yeah, but also just the fact of observing emotions is something that they may not have even practiced before. And there's something deeply powerful about observing your own emotions and and expressing them without any judgment and without any attachment to one being better than the other.
Yeah.
I think that is an amazing exercise. I'm so glad to hear that from you.
Yeah, and also me just telling them it's okay if you hated this. You don't
Yeah,
it's fine. Like, I'm not going to be hurt by that because that is what it is. I can't be perfect. Cuz I'm just Billie Jo, right? Like, I'm just me. I'm going to bring me to the table, and sometimes that me is liked and sometimes that me isn't liked. And that's okay, right?
yeah,
That is okay. And so I think really just being honest about it is okay. I think the biggest thing with kids is, as a mom myself, realizing, as I continue this journey of motherhood, realizing that kids are far more intuitive and smarter than most people give them credit for. So
absolutely.
stop diminishing their emotions and their feelings and their thoughts, and let them be, because they're going to teach you a lot. They're going to teach you a lot about yourself. They're going to teach you a lot about the world and through the eyes of the next generation that you just aren't going to see. And you need to be open to that. And I think that's just pretty cool. Like, I learn from them every day. Every day. Something happens that is like, oh, okay, note to self, right? Like, and it's only changing as they get older. We're coming into teenage years, and that's going to be different. They're really going to be, they already express their own thoughts and views quite passionately now, but I can see that there's going to be, we're not always going to agree. They're not always going to see things the way that mom and dad see, and that needs they I my husband and I need to provide a space that they can come home and share those thoughts and feelings and express what's happening. And so I'm not going to be able to do it on the same level for my students, but if I can do it on some level, then again, I feel like I've done my job, right? My job is to educate and to give a safe space. And if I can do that and bring my crazy self along for the ride, that's really energetic and passionate about the environment, that's all I can hope, that they have a really great time at the end of the hour and have some good laughs.
Ah, wow. Billie Jo, I could quite literally talk to you all day, and I feel like we should probably stop because the podcast episode's going to be really long.
Yes.
But I just want to say that I'm totally in awe of what you do, and the energy and the curiosity and the passion that you bring to it is quite literally world changing. And I just want to say a huge thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be a part of this community, and I am so honored and grateful to be here. Although I am somebody who has a big personality, I always think, like, I don't know if I have anything really to add to the conversation or to add to the table. And this community has really given me that confidence in that I do have something to add to the table. And sometimes it's just me, and that's enough. And it's just been such a wonderful experience getting to know you through Instagram, and then today, this conversation. I just really looked forward to, hopefully there is one day when I get to start to meet these virtual friends from across the world. I just think
Yes.
that would be so amazing. So I can't thank you enough for just giving me the opportunity to come on here and just kind of chat with you. It's just been, what a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My cheeks are hurting from smiling so much. Thanks, Billie Jo.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Billie Jo. Some people just radiate a special energy. Billie Jo has a knack for putting people at ease, and I was so happy to get to know her through this conversation. I'm still smiling. If you'd like to see all the online resources that Billie Jo and her colleagues have been creating, visit the link to their website in the show notes for this episode. If you're interested in getting involved in the weekly Nature Journaling Educators Forum, the link for that will be there too. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.